Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey there, this is James Valvis. I'm going to do another Freeform here. Freeform is where I just talk about whatever I feel like talking about. And today I feel like talking about the crappy camera I bought. The camera is it's not going to work. It's not going to do what I wanted it to do for the gaming stuff. It it has bad sound. You cannot hear both the machine and its sounds and my voice at the same time. I've managed to get some of the glare off the machine video, but I can only do that by shutting off all the lights in the house. So I'd have to record at night when everyone's here and sleeping. I managed to, get some of the blur out of the spinning, but that requires me holding the camera right up front. I'd have to actually play games with the tripod between my legs or something like that in order to get a decent enough picture, because otherwise I'd have to hold the stupid thing. And so what all this means is I have to throw down who knows how much money for a good camera in order to do this. And boy, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to spend $400, $500, $600 to do that. But looks like that's what's going to be necessary. It's not going to. It's not cheap. It's not. It's going to hurt a little bit, but that's what I want to do. It's hard for me to. It's really hard for me to justify it because there hasn't been a whole lot of interest in the site, but in the channel. But I feel like. I feel like if I don't invest in it at all, I mean, why am I bothering? I can only play this particular thing that I'm doing now for so long. It's already worn off its interest with most people. I think it's probably about 5 or 6 viewers at this point. Those are dedicated, hardcore Jim Valvis fans, and then there's not anything else coming through, and I need the technology to compete with an ever increasingly difficult field in which to get attention, because it really it doesn't matter how good the quality of your material is. If it comes across as amateurish, nobody's gonna pay attention to you. So I'm doing that, and I'm doing this freeform at the expense of doing other things that I'd rather be doing, which is I'd really like to talk about some theological stuff. I'd like to talk about a new Pope opinion, because I just finished I finished reading a C.S. Lewis book, and I wanted to talk about that, do a review of it. There's basically 5 essays, including what I think is probably the greatest essay written in the 20th century, which is Screwtape Offers a Toast. And so I wanted to talk about that, but here I am talking about this instead, because I just don't have the wherewithal to be able to focus on that stuff, because I've been doing all this camera stuff. I've been trying to make that work, and so I just don't have the time to go and find all the information that I need and arrange my thoughts such that I can give justice to the topics that I want to talk about. But there are multiple things that I'd like to start doing in the channel. I don't, they say don't talk about politics or religion, and that's the 2 things I want to talk about. But mostly religion. I think I have a lot to offer there, because I think, boy, we've been dumbed down when it comes to religion. Absolutely dumbed down. There's just you hear what people say, and your mouth falls open, and you think I was a lapsed Catholic who wasn't a very even bright Catholic. I didn't study. I went to Sunday school, and I went to church when I was a boy, and I went through the sacraments. But I wasn't sitting there on my weekends studying the Summa Theologica or something. But I walk out in the culture, and these people are just brain dead when it comes to religion. They're absolutely brain dead. Their minds are full of just dirt. It's like sludge flows through, especially when it comes to this topic. especially when it comes. It's in all things, but especially in this topic. And they've built into these idiotic notions that they have all these emotions. And so, if you start to talk about it, they get tightened up inside and angry. But the truth of the matter is, they just don't know anything. They just don't know anything. It's not that they disagree with you. It's that they don't even know what they're disagreeing with. They don't know anything. They think that the religion says one thing. It says completely the opposite. It's things of that sort. It's things of that nature. And I wanted to tie that in to what I was talking about with the good, the true, and the beautiful. And I especially wanted to focus on the beautiful. And I wrote a guy. I was exchanging letters with a guy before he completely lost his mind and started calling me all kinds of names. But I was exchanging polite letters with a guy about beauty, about what it means to have why modernity is ugly. It's not just that modernity is wrong. I mean, that's one thing. I mean, but it's also ugly. This is hard for when you go into an art museum, and you go and you see a toilet or an unmade bed with used condoms on the ground being called art. That is not sublime. That is not beautiful. And so you have to ask yourself, what has gone wrong in the culture that makes something that ugly and that debased elevated to the point where a museum that's funded by tax dollars, by the way, is given this crap a forum in the public eye? What's gone wrong in the culture? Now, you can say all you want about the truth of Christianity, and and you can say all you want about pedophile priests, and you can say all you want about everything else about whether or not there is a God. And you throw all those arguments out for a second. Don't just forget about them. Just just start over and start from this point. Why is it that when we look at something that comes from the height of Christendom, when we look at a Da Vinci, for instance, like the Last Supper, or even take something that's more secular like the Mona Lisa, why is that so much more beautiful than when we look at some of the art that we see that comes out today? Why was that society capable of creating a Da Vinci, and ours doesn't seem to be able to do it? Even at our best, we can't produce a Da Vinci. We can't produce an Aristotle. These are towering geniuses. I mean, we can't produce a St. Thomas Aquinas. You think Sam Harris is a match intellectually for St. Thomas Aquinas? He is not. Let me tell you straight up, not. This guy couldn't arrange the notes of St. Thomas Aquinas. He is not there intellectually. He's just not. Try reading Aquinas sometime, and then pick up a Sam Harris book and compare the two. The depth and beauty of Aquinas is unbelievable. It's insane. And if you look at the art, and you look at the beauty that comes out of that art, of Christendom, of great art from that, and then you compare it to what is called great art today, which is some woman's undergarments or something, that's supposed to mean menstruation and liberation for females. When you look at that and you say, what is this? That's your idea of beauty? That's what you got, really? You think that your movement is so wonderful. Why is it so perverse? Why is it so disgusting? Why does it repel to the civilized soul? I don't get it. But I wanted to read some of this letter, and And yet, this is just a taste of what I'm what I'm getting into. I'm not going to. I'm going to do the full talk on it. But I do want to. I want to. I want to get into this idea of beauty, because I said what I said in the letter, and what I'll say in the next talk, is that I think even if even if the argument tilted against belief in God and tilted against Christianity, and how it doesn't, the truth of Christianity is far more. It is far more likely there is a God than there isn't one. Far more. The weight of evidence is vastly on the side of belief. That's why they say, "Oh, it's faith, therefore there it's false." They confuse faith with false, but faith just means I don't have all the evidence, so therefore I cannot be certain. It does not mean that there is not evidence, or there is not a preponderance of the evidence. Look, if you find, if you believe that O.J. killed those two people, his wife and Goldman, if you believe that, that's an article of faith. You weren't there. You have no, firsthand knowledge of that. It's just an article of faith. If you believe that, China exists and you've never been to China, it's still an article of faith to some degree. Now, there's a lot of things that hold up that belief. There's a lot of pillars there that hold it up. But there's also a lot of pillars that hold up belief in God and in Christianity. These are not small pillars either. These are huge. In one of my essays, I go into the profound number of things that favor belief in God. And taking one at a time, you can dismiss them. You can dismiss, that there's a moral element to life. You can dismiss that there is something rather than nothing. Each one of these things you can dismiss by themselves. But after a while, those things combined collectively, it's like you can rip a piece of paper at a time. And this is what atheists do. They rip a piece of paper at a time in the phone book. But if you put the phone book together and you try to rip the phone book, you don't have the strength to do it. And that's what faith in God is like. Now, when I was an atheist, I came to this understanding. I came to it not because I wanted to believe it, but because it was overpowering. The evidence was overwhelming. It blew up my lack of belief in God. It blew it up. There was just no justification for it. It was just wrong. You had to be an idiot not to see it. You had to be a willful idiot. You had to participate in your own idiocy not to believe in God. That's just the way it is. That's as close to a fact as I can get into life. I've studied this issue now seriously for 15 years, hardcore, reading every book I can get, and that's books of doubt and books of belief, both of them. And I'll tell you what, the books of doubt, I've read The Atheist Illusion and the End of Faith by Sam Harris, and God is Not Great by Hitchens, and all the new atheist stuff, and some of the old atheist stuff, and it's just not there. It's prurient. It's the arguments are puerile. They're not even close to good. They're weak. They're so pathetically weak. It's sad. You actually feel sad for the people that are writing this stuff. You're like, you can't really. This is your argument. This is the best you can do, Mr. Atheist. Really? Because I used to be an atheist, and I'd be like, oh, come on, there's got to be a better argument than this for it. I remember back with Nietzsche, I was reading a lot. I read a lot of Nietzsche, and Nietzsche sure seemed to be very convinced. He never makes a strong argument against God. He makes a strong argument. He makes an argument against Christianity. He doesn't make a strong argument against God. He makes, he just declares that God is dead. Nietzsche declares that belief in God is dead. He does not declare that God doesn't exist so much, but that we've stopped believing in God. That God, in fact, is dead in our hearts. And he's not entirely wrong there. But he is wrong when he comes to the idea that there is no God. Just because God is dead in people's hearts does not mean there is no God. I do not love, my first girlfriend anymore. That doesn't mean she doesn't exist. You know, I don't believe in, Bigfoot, but that doesn't mean Bigfoot doesn't exist. I don't think he exists, but that's not the same as saying he doesn't exist. Might exist. They find Bigfoot tomorrow, yeah, there you go. But I said, even if we got to the idea that all this evidence turned and it was on the other side, and I really looked at it and I said, this, the chances are greater that there is no God than there is a God, even if that was true, and it's not. I put the odds of there being a God, it's somewhere around 98%. But let's say it was the other way. Say it was just 2% there was a chance of God. I think I would still believe in God. Not only because of what Pascal says, which is that belief in God, living your life as if there's a God, is a better way to live. You don't lose anything by believing in God. Whereas if you don't believe in God and there turns out to be a God, well, that creates all kinds of problems, not just in the next life, but in this life. But even if I believed that there was only a fractional, very small fractional, say there was like 0.1% chance there was God, or say even I believed that there was no chance there was a God. Now you're really up against it. I don't know how that you could get there. People are, that's the thing. There is really no way to get there. There is no way to get to the idea that there is no God and to be 100% certain of it. It just doesn't exist. Anybody who's telling you different, just like if anybody tells you there's 100% certainty there is a God, they're lying too. They can be absolutely positive about it themselves, but they cannot really impress that in the world. Like I said, I think there's about a 98% chance there's a God and 2% that there's not. And I'm willing to go with those odds. But if it was 0.1% chance there was a God, I still would probably choose to believe there's a God. Because I think part of faith is an act of will. It's in the same way that, you have to believe you can run the 4-minute mile before you get a Roger Bannister. If you don't believe that's humanly possible, you can never do it. But I also believe that, to some degree, people say, oh, faith is such an easy thing. No, it's not. It's an act of will. You just don't have the strength not to believe. You don't have to. The easiest thing in the world to do is just deny God. That's easy. I know, because I did it for 20 years. You can just go and live your life the way you want to live it. Do whatever you want to do, and if it leads to good consequences or bad consequences, doesn't matter. Nothing you do matters. It's a very easy way to live. Very easy way to go about your business. And even when you come up against death, it's well, you just go into the abyss and whatever, doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter if you did anything wrong. Doesn't matter if you did anything right. It's all good. YOLO. But I think even if there was a 2%, let's just be fair and say there's a 2% chance of God, I would still believe in God. Why? Because it's more beautiful. That's why. See, we forget about beauty. We talk about logic and we talk about reason. We give all these reasons. And we argue from this apologetic way of thinking about things in a reasonable way. At least some people do. Or you argue from emotion. You argue from saying, oh, Catholics, somebody abused me and they were a person in religion and therefore I stopped believing because they all suck or something like that. That's not an argument, okay? You could have focused the same, eye on just about anybody. A teacher could have been mean to you and therefore you say all education is garbage. You don't do that. So it's just, it's just an excuse. It's just arguing from emotion. It's garbage. But so we do this stuff, but we never talk about beauty. We never talk about what is the most beautiful way to live. And I guess I really am talking about it here, but I want to talk about it again later. Let this be just notes, and I'll actually probably just repeat some of this later, just exactly as I'm saying it now. I may even just play this in the next talk. And Beauty in life is a purposeful life. You say, what's the reason for life? What's a purpose-driven life? What is life? To be beautiful is a purposeful life. To be good is also a purpose. And to be honest is also a purpose. But to be beautiful is itself a reason. Who asks for the reason of a sunset, of a gorgeous sunset? Who asks for it to be good? Who asks for it to be reasoned out logically? Who asks if it's even really even there? And we're not just some, like in the Matrix somewhere. Do we say to ourselves, oh, well, this beauty may be beauty, but, let's argue against whether, the clouds are really clouds or vapors or gas. Who cares? You've come to an understanding of beauty. And what we see is, when, all through Christianity is this great love of beauty. Look at all the art. I often say, I lost my atheism not in a church, but in a museum. Because if you walk through a museum and you start at the very beginning of time, and you see this ever-increasing advancement of beauty until you get to modern times and the rejection of not just Christianity, but paganism and all that leads up to Christianity. And what you see is a turn toward the ugly. The art becomes more and more debased, less and less competent, less and less. It goes more and more inward, and not toward the beautiful, but toward the ugly and the disturbed. It doesn't sing. It doesn't celebrate. It doesn't ever come across as something that is, even when you look at really good modern art, and I'm going to count, somebody like Edward Hopper. What is his subject? His subject is isolation. His subject is alienation. The screen is all pastels and dull, and the characters look like they're immobile, like they'll never move again. And there's, everybody's into their own little heads and their own little worlds. That's why Hopper is a great artist, because he's making great commentary about the modern world. But it's still ugly. It's ugly. I mean, he knows it, though. He's one of those artists who's painting modernity as ugly because it is ugly. He sees it. He knows it's ugly. Most of them don't realize it. Most of them just paint their ugly and they think, wow, this is beautiful. I did this, so it's beautiful. I look at most modern art in either painting or music. One time, let's talk a little about music. My wife and I we were going to lots of events, cultural events, because I love the opera, and I love the symphony, and I love theater, and I love, I love just about everything but movies. I don't really care for movies. But I love going out to events like that. I just love the culture and we were going to a lot of them. And we went to all these wonderful symphonies, Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin, Stravinsky, and on and on, Vivaldi. And we were going to operas, and we were seeing, Norma and Carmen and all the rest of them. But we ended up going to this one modern symphony. And we went to the lecture ahead of time, and we were very fascinated because they talked about the guy, and they talked about how much he worked on the symphony, and it was all sounded very interesting. We were very thrilled to be able to hear this new symphony, and we got into the symphony and we listened to it, and it was bad. It was discordant. It was ugly. The music itself lacked any kind of beauty. It did. And you start to say, well, this is why they keep running Carmen out there. That's why they have to run the Ring over and over again. They do the Ring, or they do Carmen, or they do Porgy and Bess or something, or they do Norma, or they do any of the old time operas. And they, that's why they have to, run Beethoven out there one more time. And they got to run Mozart out there one more. Where's the new Mozart? Where is he? Why did we go from a place of where we were producing? I often say this about Russia. In Russia, they went from having, in one generation, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Chekhov. You can count Gogol in there. You can count maybe a couple others. And yet, for one or two generations, there was Russian, and then nothing. Well, what happens that caused the nothing? What happened? I mean, for like 100 years almost, there was nothing. Not until you get to Solzhenitsyn do you have another great Russian writer. And he was a dissident to the Soviet Union. Well, that's what happened. The Soviet Union happened. The Soviets took over, and that was it. That was the end of their great cultural rising. And so that's what we're seeing in the West. We're seeing atheism take away the beauty of life and the beauty of art. It's happening everywhere. And it's degrading our thought in ways you can't imagine. It degrades the way we look at things. We no longer see the world in wonder. We don't. We see the world scientifically at best, and I say that's at best. Mostly what we see it in, mostly we see it in a state of disgust. That's mostly how we see the world now. I just read one of my stories, The Winters in Jersey, and the story has a lot of ugliness in it. The father's a drunk, the mother is a gambler. It mirrors my life as a child. But the story is ultimately about finding beauty. The kid in the story never gives up trying to find the pure icicle that he can lick. And at the end, he wins. He finds that beauty. That's an old-fashioned story. It's a reason why it'll never be published was never published in a great place like the New Yorker and the Atlantic, and these places that love this festering hatred of life. And that's what it is. It's a hatred of beauty. They themselves know that deep down they're ugly. They know that. So even though there are all these competent and truly skilled individual artists, at the very base of their art is ugliness. Because at the very base of them is ugliness. Because at the very base of the culture, of the cultural paradigm that we are currently in, the atheistic, anti-religious, anti-life world that we live in is ugly. Abortion is ugly. It's not just evil, and it's not just wrong, and it's not just, intellectually dishonest, and it's not just all. It's an ugly thing. When you put things like that at the center, like feminism, the center of the movement of feminism is abortion. That is the basic foundational thing in which they all rally around. How in hell can you create great art when the thing that you are most passionate about is killing a baby? Think about that. Belief in God permeates every way that you think. There was a reason why I started out as a mediocre, probably a little talented, but a mediocre writer who could never get anywhere. And then I converted back to Christianity, and lo and behold, all of a sudden my work became beautiful. My thought became clear. My personal life became ordered and good. And I lifted the people who are most important to me as they lift me every day. Because there is something right about it. That's all. And there's something beautiful about it. That's all. Anyway, I'm going to talk about this more in detail later. But I wanted to get this Freeform out there. Get these thoughts out there while they're bubbling in my head. And then I'll do something more, a little more substantive later. Right now, just angry about the camera. And, but I do thank you for listening to this. I hope you found value in it. And as always, God bless you.